Welcome to Timekeepers for Sleep. If your mind keeps running like a train that never reaches the station, if you replay conversations, numbers, and worries long after the day is done, tonight you don't have to fight your thoughts. You can just give them a different set of tracks to run on. This is a fascinating story for adults about railroad time, pocket watches, and the quiet system of schedules and ticks that once kept trains and people safely apart. No tests, no trivia, no need to remember anything. You don't have to stay awake until the end. You don't even have to hear the middle. You can simply lie back, let your body become heavier, and let this slow story move in the background like distant wheels on rails. If stories like this help you fall asleep, you can always come back to Timekeepers for Sleep and build your own little ritual. Press play, put the screen face down, and let the timekeepers do their work. For now, find a position that feels easy. Let your shoulders drop where they want to drop. Let your hands land where they naturally land. There is no perfect way to lie here, only the one that lets you do nothing. Take a slow breath in through your nose and let it go in your own time. Tonight, we're going to travel back to the age of steam and steel, when trains were new, time was local, and a small pocket watch in a vest pocket could be the difference between two trains passing safely and two trains trying to be on the same stretch of track at once. This is the story of railroad time and the watches that kept it. Imagine a small railway station late in the evening, more than a century ago. The main building is a low structure of brick and wood, set close to a pair of shining steel rails that stretch off into the dark. Inside, the lamps are gas or early electric, casting a warm, steady light onto wooden benches and a worn counter where tickets are sold. The air smells faintly of coal smoke, oil, and old paper. Most passengers have gone. The last local trains have come and gone. The waiting room is quiet. In the little office behind the ticket window, a telegraph key sits on a desk, next to a ledger book, a stack of forms, and a thick timetable printed on stiff paper. On a hook by the door hangs a dark coat and hat. On the wall, a large station clock marks the hour. And at the desk, leaning slightly over a piece of paper, is the station master. He is not young, not old, somewhere in the middle. His hands are steady. His eyes are a little tired, but alert. Every few moments he glances not at the wall clock, but at something lying open on the desk, a pocket watch. Its silver or gold case is open like a small clamshell, revealing a clean white dial with black numerals, bold hands, and a small second subdial at the bottom. The minute hand moves with patient purpose. The seconds hand rotates in quiet circles. Every tick belongs to a system. Every minute written down in his ledger depends on that small dial. This watch is not an ornament. It is not a family heirloom passed down for sentimental reasons. It is a tool, a certified tool, inspected, regulated, approved. Somewhere in a jeweler's shop in a nearby city, there is a record card with this watch's serial number, showing when it was last checked, how many seconds it gained or lost, and the signature of the inspector who verified it met railroad standards. The station master knows this. He knows that down the line, other station masters, conductors, and engineers all have similar watches, all synchronized to the same master clock, all keeping the same time. This is how the system works. Not because one watch is perfect, but because they all agree. Before railroads, time was a more local thing. In many towns, the central measure of time was the sun. When the sun reached its highest point in the sky, that was noon. Church clocks and town hall clocks would be set by local noon. A town 10 miles away had its own noon. A town 50 miles away had a slightly different one. The differences were small, a few minutes here, a few minutes there, and for most daily life that was fine. If you walked or rode a horse from one town to another, your journey took long enough that a difference of a few minutes in the local clock didn't matter much. But when trains arrived, the land itself became smaller. What had been a long day's journey could now be covered in a couple of hours. Trains crossed from one town to the next quickly enough that those small differences in local time started to matter. If one station was 5 minutes ahead and another was 7 minutes behind, and trains were scheduled to meet, pass, or connect, the result could be confusion. Passengers missed connections. Freight got delayed. Messages about when trains would arrive were not always consistent. As railroads expanded, with lines stretching across whole regions and then whole countries, one simple problem kept appearing: whose time should the trains follow? In Britain, this led to the adoption of railway time, Greenwich Mean Time, used across the entire railway network by the 1840s. Bristol, in the west of England, was about 10 minutes behind London by solar time. Imagine being a passenger at Bristol Temple Mead Station in 1840. The church clock in the city center says 3 o'clock. The station clock says 3:10. Which one do you trust for your train departure? The railway company solved this by simply ignoring local time and using London time, Greenwich time, for all their schedules. This worked for the railways, but it created an odd situation where a town might have two official times: local time for daily life and railway time for catching trains. It wasn't until 1880 that Britain legally standardized time across the whole country. In North America, the situation was even more complex. By the 1880s, there were over 300 different local times being used across the continent. Each major city kept its own time. Pittsburgh was 6 minutes different from Philadelphia. Chicago was different from St. Louis. Railway companies created their own time zones, but these didn't always align with each other. A passenger traveling from the East Coast to California might pass through dozens of different times depending on which railway lines they used. On November 18, 1883, the major North American railways agreed to adopt a system of 4 standard time zones. Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. This became known as the Day of Two Noons, because when the clocks were reset at noon, some cities experienced noon twice, while others skipped ahead. It was voluntary at first. The federal government didn't officially adopt standard time zones until 1918. But the railways led the way, and once they synchronized, the rest of society gradually followed. For you tonight, this history is just background. The important part is this: before the world could agree on time, there was chaos. After agreement, there was order. And the tool that made that order possible at the human level was the pocket watch. On April 19, 1891, near a small depot called Kipton, about 40 miles west of Cleveland, Ohio, two trains collided. The fast mail train number 14 was heading east at full speed. The Toledo Express was heading west, approaching a spot where it would normally pull onto a siding to let the faster mail train pass. But something went wrong. The trains met on the same track, traveling toward each other at combined speeds of over 60 miles per hour. The collision was catastrophic. According to newspaper reports, the engine of the Toledo Express was knocked squarely across the track. The engine of the fast mail reared up in the air, resting on top of the other. The fast mail consisted of 3 mail cars and 2 parlor cars. The Toledo Express had 5 coaches and 2 baggage cars. 9 men died. 6 of them were postal clerks working in the wooden mail cars, which offered almost no protection. The investigation that followed tried to determine what had happened. There were various theories: poor visibility, misread signals, confusion about which train had priority. But one detail emerged that caught attention: the engineer's watch. Some reports suggested the watch had stopped for 4 minutes, then restarted without the engineer noticing. Whether this was the actual cause of the wreck is still debated by historians. The official reports don't conclusively blame the watch. But the Lake Shore and Michigan Southern Railroad, which operated the line, decided that timekeeping practices needed to be examined. They appointed a man named Webb C, a jeweler from Cleveland, to investigate timekeeping across their entire system. Webb was well known in the region. He ran a jewelry and watch business near the railroad tracks in Cleveland. He was skilled at watch repair and regulation. He understood precision timekeeping. More importantly, he was a businessman. He saw an opportunity. Ball traveled the railway lines, visiting stations, talking to engineers and conductors, examining their watches. What he found was inconsistency. Some railroad men carried high-quality watches. Others carried cheap ones. Some had their watches serviced regularly. Others never did. There were no universal standards for what made a watch acceptable for railroad use. In 1893, Ball published a set of standards, requirements that a watch had to meet to be approved for railroad service. These standards included: a watch must be open face, meaning no cover over the dial that could accidentally close and block the view of the time. It must be size 18 or 16, large enough to be read clearly and robust enough to be reliable. Later, size 16 became standard. It must have at least 17 jewels, though 19 or 21 became more common. These synthetic ruby or sapphire bearings reduced friction and wear. It must be adjusted to at least 5 positions, meaning it keeps accurate time whether lying flat, hanging vertical, or at various angles. It must be adjusted to temperature, maintaining accuracy whether worn in summer heat or winter cold. It must have a lever set mechanism, not a stem set. This meant you had to open a small lever inside the bezel to set the time, preventing accidental changes. It must have a white enamel dial with bold black Arabic numerals. No fancy Roman numerals, no hard-to-read script. It must have a second subdial, usually at the 6 o'clock position, to allow precise synchronization. And most importantly, it must maintain accuracy within 30 seconds per week, verified by regular inspection. Ball didn't manufacture watches himself. Instead, he partnered with American watch companies, Waltham, Hamilton, Elgin, Howard, and had them produce watches to his specifications. These watches would carry his name and his brand, Ball Official Railroad Standard. Within a few years, Ball became the chief time inspector for over 125,000 miles of railroad track in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Whether the Kipton wreck was truly caused by a faulty watch or not, the story became part of railroad legend. And the result was a dramatic improvement in timekeeping safety across the entire industry. For you, lying here in the dark, this disaster is distant history. But it's a reminder of something simple. Small failures and small tools can have large consequences. And equally, small improvements in those same tools can save lives. Let's step now into the cool interior of a watch factory in Waltham, Massachusetts, sometime in the early 1900s. The American Waltham Watch Company was one of the largest watch manufacturers in the world. Their factory complex covered several large brick buildings along the Charles River. Inside, rows of benches, bright windows, the smell of oil, metal, and wooden floors that have seen years of shuffling feet. In one corner, cases are polished. In another, dials are printed and fired in small kilns. In another still, small gears are cut with precise, repeating machinery, lathes and mills operated by skilled workers. Along one long bench, watchmakers sit, loops screwed into their eyes, tweezers in hand. They assemble movements for watches destined for railroad service. Each movement is a tiny city. Bridges like streets holding wheels in place. Wheels like commuters, passing energy along from the mainspring to the escapement. Jewels, tiny synthetic rubies or sapphires, serving as low-friction bearings for pivots. A mainspring coiled tight, storing potential energy. When wound, it can power the watch for 30 to 40 hours. A balance wheel, oscillating back and forth 18,000 times per hour, governed by a delicate hairspring no thicker than a human hair. In the regulation department, each watch is tested in multiple positions. It's placed dial up, then dial down, then on its side with the crown at 12 o'clock, then at 3 o'clock, then at 9 o'clock. At each position, its rate is measured. Does it run fast? Does it run slow? By how much? A skilled regulator adjusts tiny screws on the balance wheel, moving small weights inward or outward, changing the watch's rate by fractions of a second. This work requires patience and precision. A single adjustment might change the rate by only a few seconds per day. The regulator tests again, adjusts again, tests again. The goal: a watch that maintains accuracy within a few seconds per day, regardless of how it's positioned or what temperature it's exposed to. Once a movement passes all tests, it's cased. The dial and hands are fitted. The movement is lowered into a sturdy case, nickel-plated, gold-filled, or solid gold, depending on the buyer's budget. The case back is screwed on. The crystal is pressed into the bezel. Finally, the watch is placed in a small box with documentation: the serial number, the grade name, the jewel count, and a note certifying it meets railroad standards. For a ball watch company order, the movement might also receive special damascening, decorative circular patterns engraved into the metal plates, and a small gold seal on the movement marked RR for railroad. When a railroad man purchases such a watch, he is buying not just an object, but an invisible promise from everyone in that long chain of production. The person who cut the gears, the person who set the jewels, the person who adjusted the balance, the person who tested it for days. All of them contributed to making this watch something that could be trusted. In your bed tonight, you don't have to see the gears or jewels. You can simply adopt the sense that a great number of small, careful actions have gone into making the tools that kept trains apart. And you can let that thought become softer, quieter, until it's just a gentle background hum, like distant machinery. Imagine now a small jewelry shop in a Midwestern town. The front window displays pocket watches, chains, rings, and silver. But in the back, in a small office with good light, sits the watch inspector. He's an authorized agent for the ball watch company, or perhaps for the railway company directly. His job is to inspect the watches of railroad employees, engineers, conductors, firemen, dispatchers, every 2 weeks or every month, depending on the company's rules. On his desk sits a master clock, synchronized to railroad time via telegraph signal or later telephone. This clock is his reference. Every watch he inspects will be compared against it. An engineer walks in. He's finishing his shift, or perhaps starting it, and it's time for his watch inspection. He reaches into his vest pocket, pulls out his watch on its chain, and hands it to the inspector. The inspector opens the case, notes the time showing on the dial, and compares it to his master clock. The watch reads 2:14 and 22 seconds. The master clock reads 2:14 and 18 seconds. The watch is 4 seconds fast. The inspector makes a note in his logbook: the watch's serial number, the date, the amount of gain. 4 seconds over 2 weeks. That's acceptable. It's well within the 30-second per week tolerance. If the watch had been more than 30 seconds off, the inspector would need to adjust it, or, if it couldn't be adjusted, recommend repair or replacement. A railroad employee found with a watch that doesn't meet standards could be suspended from service until the problem is fixed. The inspector opens the back of the watch to examine the movement. He checks that the jewels are clean, that the balance swings freely, that there's no dirt or lint in the mechanism. He might add a tiny drop of oil to a bearing if it looks dry. Then he closes the case, hands it back to the engineer, and writes out a small card certifying that the watch has been inspected and approved. The engineer pockets the card in the watch, nods, and leaves. This ritual happens hundreds of times a month in towns across the railway network. It's quiet, bureaucratic routine. But it's also essential. Because the entire system depends on this. Everyone involved must know that everyone else's watch is showing the same time within a few seconds. There's no GPS, no atomic clocks, no radio signals. Just mechanical watches, human inspection, and trust. Let's follow one such watch through a quiet, ordinary day. It might be a Hamilton Grade 992, or a Ball Waltham Official Railroad Standard, or an Elgin B.W. Raymond. The specific brand doesn't matter for this story. What matters is what it does. Early in the morning, in a boarding house near the station, a conductor wakes up. He dresses slowly, buttoning his shirt, fastening his vest, tying his tie. Before he puts on his jacket, he takes out his watch from the dresser. He opens the case, glances at the time, and listens, just for a moment, to the ticking. If it sounded wrong, he would know. But it sounds right. The same small heartbeat it has had for years. At the station, before his shift officially begins, he must get railroad time. At a certain hour, perhaps 8 a.m., the station's master clock receives a time signal. In the earliest days, this signal came by telegraph, later by telephone, eventually by radio. When the signal arrives, the station master sets or confirms the master clock. The conductor stands near that clock. When the minute hand clicks to the exact minute, he opens his watch and compares. His watch reads 8 o'clock and 12 seconds. The station clock reads 8 o'clock and 10 seconds. 2 seconds difference. Acceptable. He makes a mental note and closes the case. If the difference had been larger, he would have used the small lever inside the bezel to adjust the hands. Now his watch agrees with the railroad's master time. Throughout the day, as trains arrive, depart, wait, couple, and uncouple, he will flip that case open many times. He will call out to passengers, 5 minutes until departure, because his watch says so. He will look before giving the signal to start rolling. He will look when checking if a delayed connection is still worth holding. He will look without thinking, as natural as breathing. At each glance, he is relying on a system built from steel, gears, springs, and agreements between people. And somewhere down the line, other conductors are doing the same thing. Opening their watches, checking the time, making decisions based on what those small white dials tell them. This is how the system works. Not through magic or technology beyond understanding, but through repetition, standards, and trust.
Railroad tracks are not like wide highways where cars can pass one another easily. On many lines, especially in the early days, there was just one track running in each direction, with stations and sidings where trains could pass. On a single track line, two trains heading toward each other cannot be on the same piece of track at the same time without something going very wrong. To prevent that, railroads created timetables and train orders that carefully scheduled when each train should leave a station, when it should arrive at the next, and where it should wait for another train to pass. Some trains held priority, fast passenger trains, important mail trains, and others had to wait for them. All of this depended on time. If a train ran a few minutes late, and another train trusted the timetable rather than more recent orders, the result could be two engines furiously hauling steel carriages toward the same point on the same line. A few minutes could separate a routine passing move from a collision. You don't have to picture the collision. You don't have to imagine the noise or the damage. It's enough for this story to say, in the age of steam, the price of a wrong minute could be very high. Railroads learned this from painful experience. In the wake of accidents where late or incorrect timekeeping played a role, rail companies realized that they needed something more reliable than whatever clock happened to be on a station wall or in a conductor's pocket. They needed a system. And the foundation of that system was the pocket watch. Not just any pocket watch, but one that met specific standards. One that had been tested, regulated, inspected, and approved. One that could be trusted. For you tonight, this principle applies to your own life in a different way. You don't need to keep trains apart. But you do need systems you can trust. Systems for rest, for winding down, for letting go of the day. This story, this ritual of lying down and listening, can be one of those systems. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to work often enough that you trust it. While the conductor moves between cars and platforms, inside the station someone else has their fingers on another kind of time machine. On the desk in the small office, the telegraph key waits. Once, this was how messages moved faster than trains. A dispatcher in a central office could send instructions to multiple stations along the line. Hold train 7 for connection. Extra freight section following train 12. Meet eastbound at siding 14. Priority for mail train. These short messages, encoded in dots and dashes, carry decisions about time and movement. The station agent or operator would take them down, write them out on forms, and pass them to conductors and engineers to sign and follow. In this world, a few minutes could be granted or taken away by tapping on a small brass key. Every order depended on all parties sharing the same time. When the telegraph line carried the daily time signal, indicating a precise second to set clocks, it created an invisible line of timekeeping over the physical lines of track. On maps and dispatching offices, little flags or pins mark the positions of trains. They were moved not just by the train's progress, but by the times recorded at stations. Seen from above, on paper, it looked orderly. From inside a locomotive cab, with steam pressure humming, coal burning, and rails glinting ahead, it felt like trust. Trust that the orders were clear, that the watch in your pocket matched the watch in someone else's, and that the train coming the other way would be where it was supposed to be. Imagine being an engineer on a night run. You're heading west on a single track line. Your train order says you'll meet the eastbound freight at siding mile 47 at 11:42 p.m. You glance at your watch. It's 11:30. You have 12 minutes. The track ahead is dark except for your headlamp. You trust the order. You trust your watch. You trust that the other train's crew has the same order and the same time. At 11:38, you see the siding ahead. You slow down. At 11:40, you pull onto the siding and stop. At 11:42, exactly on schedule, you see the headlamp of the eastbound train approaching on the main track. It passes. You wait. Then you pull back onto the main track and continue west. The whole interaction took 5 minutes. And it worked because everyone involved, dispatchers, station agents, conductors, engineers, all had watches showing the same time. For you, lying here now, this scene is distant. But it's a reminder of something simple. Coordination requires agreement. An agreement requires tools you can trust. Let's step away from the noise of factories and trains and come back to you. Your own body keeps multiple schedules. You have daily rhythms, times when you tend to be alert, times when you dip, times when you get a second wind. You have hunger cycles, attention cycles, sleep cycles. Unlike a railroad, you do not have to manage them down to the minute. Right now, the only schedule that matters is this. From now until you fall asleep, nothing urgent needs to happen. You do not have to arrive anywhere. You do not have to finish anything. You do not have to keep up. You can imagine, if you like, that there's a big timetable posted at the edge of your mind. On it, only one line. Train sleep. Departure, whenever you are ready. Platform, this pillow. There are no connections to catch, no penalties for delay, no inspectors. If your thoughts run on and on, like a train passing through small stations, that's all right. They do not have to stop on command. They only have to slow, over time, until they grow too soft to notice. Take a moment now to notice your body. Notice the weight of your head against the pillow. Notice your shoulders. Are they touching the mattress? Are they slightly raised? You don't have to change them. Just notice. Notice your arms. Where are they? Beside you? Across your chest? One bent, one straight? Let them rest where they are. Notice your hands. Are your fingers curled? Are they flat? They don't need to do anything. Notice your legs. Are they straight? Slightly bent? Crossed at the ankles? Let them be heavy. Notice your feet, your toes. They've carried you all day. Tonight, they can just rest. Notice your breath. In through your nose and out in your own time. You don't have to control it. Just notice it. Like the ticking of a watch, your breath has a rhythm. And like a watch, it can keep going without you paying attention to it. A good railroad watch often outlived its first owner. When a conductor retired, or an engineer left the service, the watch might be given to a child, a grandchild, or another relative. It moved from vest pocket to dresser drawer. No longer inspected, no longer adjusted by official standards, it became a family keepsake. Years later, someone might open an old box and find it. Heavier than modern things, cool to the touch, its dial simple and calm. If wound, it might still tick. If not, it might simply be silent, resting. The person who finds it might know its history, or might not. They might imagine the ancestor who looked at this dial one night in a lonely siding, waiting for another train to pass. They might bring the watch to a modern watchmaker who opens the back carefully, examining bridges and springs made long ago. The watchmaker might see the serial number engraved on the movement and look it up in a database. This is a Hamilton grade 992, the watchmaker might say, made in 1925, adjusted to 6 positions, 21 jewels. This was a high-grade railroad watch. The owner might ask, does it still work? The watchmaker winds it gently, listens, nods. It works. The balance is good. The escapement is clean. Someone took care of this. And then the watch might go back into service, not on the rails, but on a shelf, or in a collection, or worn occasionally to special events. Or it might go back into the drawer to rest until someone else finds it years from now. In your own life, you may have objects like this, things that carried someone else's responsibility before they arrived in your hands. You do not have to give them the same weight. You can allow objects to become lighter over time, just as you can allow yourself to set down responsibilities when the day is done. Not all trains were daytime local runs. Some were night trains, long-distance services that carried people in sleeping cars from one city to another while they rested. Imagine boarding such a train. You step up into a warm, lighted car. The carpet is soft. The air smells faintly of polished wood and linen. At one end, a porter stands, ready to help with bags. Along the corridor, you see doors to private compartments or open sections with upper and lower berths. You find your place. Your bed, narrow but neatly made, waits behind a curtain or a small sliding door. Outside, on the platform, a conductor checks his watch, makes a note on his clipboard, and signals the engineer with a lantern or a whistle. The train begins to move. The station lights slip by, then the signals, then the outline of warehouses and sidings. Soon, the rhythm of travel settles in. The soft sway of the car. The muffled clatter of wheels on joints in the rail. The occasional, distant whistle. Inside the sleeping car, lamps are dimmed. Passengers change into night clothes, climb into their berths, and allow themselves to be carried through the dark by a machine whose progress is guided by schedules and the watches of the crew. Somewhere in the train, the conductor opens his pocket watch, verifies that they are on time, then closes it again. The watch will be opened and closed many times in the night. You, in your own bed, can imagine being in one of those berths. The world slides by outside. Time is being handled by someone else. You are free to let go of the clock for a while. The curtain is drawn. The train rocks gently. And sleep, when it comes like arriving at a station you didn't have to announce. As the years passed, timekeeping moved on. Electric clocks, synchronized by signals over wires or radio, appeared in stations. Later still, digital systems, computer screens, GPS time signals. Railroads adopted more layers of safety. Signals that enforce spacing between trains, automatic train control systems, dispatching software that tracks every movement. The pocket watch slowly shifted from essential tool to symbolic accessory to historical artifact. On some lines, mechanical watches continue to be used and approved. On others, electronic timekeeping became the norm. But the principle remained familiar. There must be a shared time, trusted by everyone involved, so that movement can be coordinated. For this story, you don't have to follow each technical change. It's enough to see that the human need to agree on time has simply moved to new platforms. Your own phone, if you have one near you now, takes its time from distant servers, signals bouncing between towers and satellites. You don't see the machinery. You just see a number on a screen. Once, that number lived on a white enamel dial behind a glass crystal in a brass case on a chain. Different medium, same idea. And the same need to know that when you say now and someone else says now, you're talking about the same moment. Think again about your day. You may have had meetings, appointments, alarms, reminders, times by which you had to do things. Those times belong to the day. They are behind you now. There might be more tomorrow. There might be many. But between now and tomorrow, there is this interval where you do not have to catch any train. If your mind keeps showing you little timetables, I should have said this, I should have done that. Tomorrow I must remember. You can imagine a kind, quiet station master taking those papers from you one by one, stamping them deferred, and placing them in a drawer. They are not thrown away. They are not lost. They are simply not for this shift. This shift is staffed by rest. Picture yourself now walking along a railway line at dusk. You are not on the rails themselves, but on a safe path alongside, where maintenance workers might walk. The sky is turning from blue to deep indigo. The last of the sunset fades behind distant trees. The rails stretch ahead, two lines of dull silver. They catch the last light in long reflections. Every so often, there is a telegraph pole or a signal standing like a silent guard. In the distance, you see the faint glow of a small station. You walk slowly. There is no hurry. You are not trying to reach a particular train. You can hear, far away, the low rumble of a locomotive but is not near you. Your footsteps on the gravel make a soft, crunching sound. The air is cool, carrying hints of smoke and earth. As you walk, you notice how straight the rails are. They seem to converge on the horizon, though you know they do not. They are designed to guide movement smoothly forward. Your thoughts can be like that. They may wander briefly left or right, but they can also settle into a simple line. I am here. It is evening. I am allowed to slow down. Ahead, the small station draws nearer. Light spills through its windows. You see a figure inside the office, bent over a desk. On the wall, the station clock. On the desk, open in a pool of light, a pocket watch. The scene is quiet, matter of fact, uncomplicated. You do not need to go inside. You can simply pause outside the station, feel the mild tiredness in your legs, and notice that it feels good. You have covered some distance. You can stop now. We've traveled through small stations, factories, sleeping cars, and dispatchers' offices. You've met in your imagination the station master, the conductor, the watch inspector, the night porter, the future descendant who finds an old watch in a box. All of them, in their own ways, trusted a system of time that helped keep trains apart. The railroad watch was part of that system, a small circle of metal and glass that, when held open in a hand, gave a person the confidence to start, stop, or hold a train. You, lying here now, do not have to hold anything. You are not responsible for hundreds of tons of steel or for complicated networks of schedules. Trains, both literal and metaphorical, can run on their own for a while. You can let others keep the time. If your eyes are not yet closed, you may feel them growing heavier. If your breathing has not yet slowed, you may notice it becoming softer by itself. There is no need to hurry this process. Sleep is not a train you must catch before it leaves the platform. It is more like a siding where your mind can quietly roll and then settle. If you drift in and out of this story, that is fine. If you never heard the beginning properly, or if you wake later and realize you missed the end, that means you used it exactly as intended. If this kind of story helps you rest, you can come back to Timekeepers for sleep on another night, for another journey with time. For now, the timetable for the rest of this night is very simple. No departures, no arrivals, just rest. The trains can run on railroad time. You, for these hours, are off duty. You can let your thoughts uncouple one by one until there are none left to shun around. You can let the tracks stretch away into the dark without needing to follow them. You can sleep now. Good night.